Nothing on the Bonnell Foundation's Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast should be considered medical advice. Medical advice can only come from your CF physician. Cystic fibrosis can be a devastating diagnosis, but living with the disease can bring positivity and a new appreciation for each day. From the Bonnell Foundation in Detroit, Michigan, it's the Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast, sponsored by Viatris, Genentech, and Vertex. Here's your host, Laura Bonnell.
People getting married who have CF, we don't hear about that happening very often. We've always been told that people with CF should not be in the same room together unless they're 6 feet apart. This is impossible to do if you have children with the disease and, of course, if you marry someone with cystic fibrosis. Zack and Farrel both have CF, and knowing the reasons why they shouldn't marry did not keep them apart. They met in 2014 on a Facebook cystic fibrosis group where Farrel was sharing a testimony of how changing her diet had helped improve her lung function and quality of life, despite losing a couple of pounds in the process. And Zack was talking about his own journey with CrossFit and his experience, and he experienced some of the similar results, an increase in lung function, even though he had lost a few pounds, while increasing his cardiovascular exercise. They didn't believe in the eat everything you can in high-calorie mantra that was told to all CF parents at diagnosis. The couple followed each other on social media for a while, but it wasn't until the following May of 2015 where their daily communication started. So Zack and Farrel ended up marrying in July of 2016, and it wasn't without controversy, and that is where our discussion begins with them. So it's so wonderful to have you both. We only just recently met, and it's great to see you face to face. Thank you both for being willing to talk about this, Zack and Farrel, about the fact that you're married and everything that comes with making that decision. So if you can both kind of say how that went, for each of your family members and parents and all of that.
Yeah, so it was it was tough. Farrel had actually dated a couple of people with CF in the past. So that was not new for her. It was very new for me. I had never even been face to face with anybody else other than seeing somebody in a hospital hall or something. I think our family was initially very timid and then also very excited because, they'd seen us interacting on social media over, 6 months or so. Loved where we were both coming from and where we were at in life. But it was definitely a big step, a big leap of faith to be like, okay, we're going to meet for the first time. And man, that first trip, Farrel flew from Arlington, Texas. It's where I was at in Tampa, Florida. And I just went and picked her up at the airport, just the two of us. We hung out and met each other that first day and then went to go meet my family the second day. And that was July 16th, 2015. And Farrel was just immediately adored by my mom and my stepdad. And we had like a 4 or 5 day trip that first time meeting together planned out. But man, it was tough. And then maybe a few months into our relationship, we're like, okay, this is serious. Excuse me. My lung functions had been bad in Ohio before I moved down to Florida. I moved to Florida when I was 25. We knew this was going to be a topic of conversation for our care team. And when we started thinking about moving her from Texas to Florida, we approached our care team, was like, hey, this is a real relationship. We've been together for about 6 months. We're moving towards marriage for sure. And, how do you guys feel about that? It's good talking to our CF care coordinator and then to our actual physician. And they were both like, okay, man, I love you, Zack. This is, I know you've been thinking a lot about this. This is tough. Would she consider being a patient here also, where we could keep an eye on both of you guys? And we're like, yeah, absolutely. It's a part of the plan. And they were like, okay, let's do this. Because I was close to being on the lung transplant list. That's why I moved to Florida. I was like that borderline floating around 30% lung function at the time. And didn't want to be considered disqualified or non-compliant as a patient if I needed a lung transplant. So we just treaded those waters carefully. But then they met her at the first visit, and we were just like, okay, this is totally real. This isn't a fling. This isn't a fluke. These guys are meant to be together. And it was very, very apparent.
And Farrell, on your side of the situation, how did that go?
I would say my friends were a little more nervous for me than anything, because they were concerned that I was going to show up and get murdered. They were scared that Zack was not who he said he was. My mom was very go with it. She loved the sound of him. She loved how happy that he made me. She loved how good he already took care of me, even long distance. She loved hearing about our trips to see each other, and she was all for it. I remember being at a Mexican food restaurant with my two best friends at the time, and I really thought Zack was never going to talk to me again because they messaged him on Facebook demanding a copy of his driver's license and his employment information, which, looking back on it now, was probably very wise.
I'm not going to throw you off the bridge. You know who you are.
But it was probably very wise. So I would say my CF team was, they were fine with it. They understood me wanting to move. They understood wanting to try out a different climate. I had never lived in Florida before. And yeah, so I would say my side, my friends were probably a little more worried than anything. But again, same thing. They met Zack and they were like, oh, go for it. He's great. So.
But they weren't worried about the CF aspect. They were worried about murder.
They were. They actually were a little worried. One of my friends was a little worried. She only knew me from hospital visits, or not only knew me from hospital visits, but she knew me through the hospital visits. And she was very concerned about, so are you guys going to be in the hospital together? Are you going to be in the hospital more? Are you guys going to get each other more sick? And we just kind of had to say, I don't know. And so far, we're 8.5 years in, and that hasn't been the case. But at that time, it was just, I don't know. We're going to have to wait and see.
And, it's interesting. I've been thinking about this because I do think, just from, the movie 5 Feet Apart, and just from people talking about it, it is frowned upon, right? But then I was thinking about it, and obviously both my daughters have cystic fibrosis. And I remember at one point when the doctor said, yeah, just try and keep them apart and keep the windows rolled down in the car. And I said, that's impossible.
Yeah.
I mean, it's impossible. Don't drink out of each other's drinks. Good luck, right? I mean, you try as hard as you can, but kids are kids, and they don't have all of the same bacteria. So after all this years and all this togetherness, they still don't have everything of the same as far as bacteria goes.
Right.
So either one of you were not fearful of this either, or was this what you thought about as well?
I would have to say, just because of my involvement with the CF community, I had a lot of friends beforehand. And like he said, I had, casually dated a couple of people where they were just, I don't think this is going to work out. But more so, I had a lot of friends, and we traveled together. We traveled for each other. We opened our homes to each other. I've been in, a couple of my CF friends' weddings, and I know that it has happened and that it continues to happen. But it was not something that I was necessarily afraid of. I guess really just because of my experience in the community. It had never happened with any of my friends and I. And it was just that the benefits outweighed it so much, like to just have a community that understood on a firsthand level, not just said, oh, that really sounds terrible, I'm so sorry, but is really, in the trenches with you and says, no, I get it. And this is what I did. Like, it was just invaluable. And that's what our marriage ended up being. It's invaluable to have somebody on those really, really bad days. They don't have to ask, what do I need to do? Then, all they need to do is just look at you and say, okay, I've got your oxygen ready. I've got your antibiotics ready. I've got your breathing treatment ready. Here's a pallet on the couch. Let's go out there and watch, movies all day. It's invaluable. And really, when it came down to that, when it came down to my decision, Personally, my decision was it's worth it. It's worth it. And I remember saying, and some people are going to disagree with this, and that's okay. Like, it's not our try to change anybody's mind. My personal decision was I would rather have a quality of life that's not as long than a quantity of life that is not as deep and rich and full and understanding and understood as possible.
And Zach, what about you? Because that is what I was going to ask you, but you beautifully answered it, Farrell. What having the same disease brought to the marriage?
Yeah, I think at first, I didn't think as deeply as she did. I do now. I definitely stopped and thought about it, especially that first meeting. I was very nervous. Similar, not as deep as my wife thought about, but I was like, okay, if this is real, it's going to be worth it. Whatever consequences come, if this is real, it's worth it. And those first several meetings, again, we met 4, 5, 6 times. She flew to Tampa. I flew to Arlington and saw each other for 3, 4, 5, sometimes 6 days at a time. Before we were like, okay, we're meshing really well. I'm being able to pick her up where she's weak on days, and she's able to totally be there for me on my weekdays. And again, I don't think we were ever sick when we visited.
No.
It wasn't until we moved in together that we saw, a horn or an ugly.
Mm-hmm.
But those first several times, it was just absolutely invaluable to have her hear me do my breathing treatments and go, okay, this is a bad day.
Mm-hmm.
I need to be softer. I need to be more gentle. On her bad days, it was, okay, extra cuddle time, extra snacks, extra movie time. And again, no words, just you knew, and we could be there for each other. And we watched our health get better.
Yeah.
It didn't get worse. It got
We were
better.
our healthiest at that point when we lived in Florida and we were first together. We were the healthiest I think we had both been in years.
Yeah.
And you're in East Texas now, correct?
Yes, ma'am. In Tyler, Texas. Yeah.
How are you both doing as far as your health goes?
Yeah, I've dropped maybe 5% baseline. I got my lung function back up to 40% in Florida doing, CrossFit, nutrition, that kind of thing. It's been hovering. It's been hovering around 35 for the last. We've been here 5 years now, 5.5 years. So stable, but not as good as in Florida.
And for the past couple of years, I've just had a very strange fluke going on. I've been in the hospital 7 times since the end of 2020. They couldn't quite get a grasp, and I don't even know if they still really ever got a grasp on exactly what was going on. I pulled out of it, thank God. But when I went in the first time in 2020, my lung functions were around the 60s. And that was low for me. My baseline was about 85. And in the last 2 years, I've seen everything from 60 to 92 to 29. I literally dropped from 92 to 29 in about a month and a half. Caught some bug, went in December into the ER with acute respiratory failure, and by the grace of God, bounced back. And now I'm back up in the 70s and just kind of praying that doesn't ever happen again, because that was terrible. East
Texas
has been very hard on both of us. But I would say for the most part, for being 40 and 37, I would say we're both still pretty remarkably healthy.
That is wonderful. What are some of your concerns? I wanted you to talk about food too, because that is something we agreed on with my kids as well, not to go the route that we were initially told, like just give them butter and high fat and give them ice cream for dinner. And then, just pour on the food. And we just realized when they were getting older, my gosh, they can eat healthy and still gain weight.
Sure. Yeah, that was the exact same route that my mom took. In 1983, when I was diagnosed, they told her the same thing. They said, give her McDonald's, give her ice cream, give her everything with calories. And my mom was like, that sounds like the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And she wasn't trying to be rude, but she was just, that doesn't make any sense to me. Why, if infection is what you're primarily, like, you've got it hard enough when you're healthy with CF, if you're trying to stay away from infection, why would you lend all of your time and your energy to eating these foods that are inflammatory? And so she did the same thing. She studied food combining and learned how to pair, greens and starches and lean proteins and everything. And I mean, on a level that I never got to. But we try to, and that's not to say that we, especially these past, I would say 6 or 7 months, there's been a lot of comfort food the last year or so. But ideally, when we're on a good, solid diet, we avoid dairy, we avoid gluten. I always have to avoid high fructose corn syrup and MSG. MSG really closes my throat up, and high fructose corn syrup just makes me really anxious. If we do sugar, we try to do cane sugar or raw sugar instead of regular. And we really try to do a lot of monk fruit. Like, we try to substitute a lot of stuff to try and stay as healthy as possible. And it's hard because when you are sick and in pain all the time, are wanting and craving comfort, like, it's almost constant. It's almost nonstop. There are very few days that it's like, oh, I feel good. I don't need extra snacks or chocolate or whatever. But when we do stay conscientious of it, and when we do discipline ourselves better, we try to mainly avoid those 5 things. And we can see a remarkable difference in our health when we do. And even when I go in the hospital, for whatever reason, I start craving better foods. I eat a lot of salads, a lot of grilled chicken. We go to UT Southwestern in Dallas, and they just have 5-star kitchen downstairs. It's amazing. They feed us so well. Mm-hmm. And I start to crave better food. I want the fruit. I want vegetables. I want, all that kind of stuff. And then we get home and
it's tougher.
It's right back to the chocolate.
And let me ask you, are you both on the CF modulator? Are you both able to take that? And if so, has it helped?
I'll start. I am on a modulator. Was that winter of 2019, December of 19? So that was a hospitalization for me. I went several years. I did not go into the hospital when I lived at those 5 years in Florida, and made it a couple years in Texas before being hospitalized. But yeah, the winter of 19, my lung functions dropped down into the 20s, and it was scary. And we started talking transplant again. I was just like, I don't think transplant's right for me just yet. And they were not happy with that decision. They thought I was a little crazy. I was like, that's okay. That's just where I'm being led right now. That's not for me right now. And then the modulator came out in 2019, and I started on in December of 2019. And I immediately got energy bump. My lung function did not jump a whole lot, maybe 3-4% at most. But I went from, I went from not being able to move or exercise to jogging around the block. So I've been on a modulator for a little over 3 years now, and it's had me steady, constant. I still have pain. I still do my breathing treatments, still get in the gym and exercise as often as I can. I still eat right, but I don't wake up choking anymore. I don't absolutely 100% have to do my breathing treatments before I go to bed, or I wouldn't be able to sleep like in the past. I create almost no mucus now. Like you'll hear me. I still clear my throat from time to time. It's still there, but it's way, way better.
Sure.
She was pretty much the opposite.
Yeah. I kind of joke around that we're a house divided when it comes to the modulators, because I get all the side effects and he gets none of them. And so we actually got to take our first dose of the modulator the very first time together. And I didn't really start seeing the side effects for maybe about a month. But when they hit hard. I did feel the anxiety that a lot of people experience on modulators. I did feel that immediately, but mine was more the GI route. I just stopped going to the restroom for days and days and days at a time. Mm-hmm. My lung function, however, it was a very difficult decision for me to make because, like I said, when we first moved here and kind of got settled in, my lung functions were 50s to 60s. And about 2 weeks in, we had a doctor's visit and they were 106.
Wow.
And so I had to make the decision, if I wanted my lungs or my GI to work. And for me personally, I saw more misery in the side of my GI not working because I went off of it for a little while and then I went back on just to kind of gauge which one I could deal with better. And, for me personally, the GI was far, far more miserable. And so I came off of it in February and then tried again and then came off of it again. So it's been a little bit of a journey, but that is definitely something that our doctor has pushed me to retry just because of my hospital visits lately. And I can't do it. I can't.
When they retried you again, was it at the same dose?
No, it was actually a baby dose. I took a quarter of the dose and I still did not go to the restroom for 7 days. It was Sunday to Sunday. And I was like, I can't do it even on just the quarter dose. So.
Because I had learned that when they desensitize you to that modulator, that they can put it in a liquid form and give you very small doses for about a month and then get you on the pill form in a month. So I didn't know if you had tried that or if that had worked. But yeah, that really is painful. I mean, I'm just talking mentally, in addition to the physical aspect you had, because all your hope is kind of there. And then your husband's able to reap the benefits of it, right? That's really hard.
It has been really awesome to get to see him, though. I'll never forget the very first morning. It was 4 days in, and I woke up and it was quiet. And I will never forget the sound of silence when I woke up that morning because I was used to waking up every morning to the nebulizer humming and to him coughing until he vomited every single morning. And 4 days into it, I had to go look for him to find out where he was. And he was out in the backyard playing with our dog. And that was an extraordinary feeling to not. And I think I've heard that noise twice in the last 3 years. It has not been missed. I'll just say that.
Right. And even for us and my daughters, it's like, wow, same thing. I didn't even want to speak about it when I noticed that there was no coughing. I was like, I'm just not going to say anything until she notices that she's not coughing anymore. And I didn't. It was really hard not to say something. But at that time, she was living at our house and she ended up, that was like, I don't remember, day 4. I think it was day 4 for us too. I have everything journaled, and I was like, oh my gosh, every day you notice something, but the coughing that stopped, that was just unbelievable, right? And it's so beautiful that just like my own kids, day 9, one of my daughters, I don't like to keep saying who because I don't think it's important, but one of them had to go off of it because of a reaction. She had hives head to toe and was having problems. But she said the same thing to her sister as you're saying to your husband was, you stay on it. You're not going to stop because I can't take it. And it's just a beautiful, supportive thing. And I really appreciate you helping me and everyone else understand, because you really don't think that most people don't think anybody with cystic fibrosis should marry another person with cystic fibrosis. Really, that's what's out there. What are you finding now that you're 8 years in? Do some people give you their thoughts on it, or is it pretty well accepted?
It's still a mixed bag. It is absolutely still a mixed bag. So,
sorry.
Any public engagement, speaking engagement, whatever, we feel it necessary to preference. This isn't for everybody. Like, this was long thought out, heavily discussed amongst friends, families, CF care teams. It was not on a whim, but I wouldn't have it any other way personally. But yeah, dude, we still get hate. We still get hate. We still get shunned out of chat rooms and shunned out of speaking engagements. They're like, oh, we just wanted one of you. We don't want both of you.
We've been told that they hope that we die, so that we'll stop draining the economy with our disability lifestyle, and that if we ever have kids, that they hope that they die too. We have heard some gnarly stuff behind keyboards. And I don't think we've ever heard any in person. I will say that. The people that we know in person are incredibly supportive. We are Christians, we're Jesus followers, and a lot of our friends just look at us and they say, so, and I say this with no arrogance, like they say, so basically we're looking at 2 walking miracles. Like, how could anybody not like that? How could anybody get mad at that? And our answer is, I don't know. For some reason, it makes some people overjoyed and it makes some people cringe and repulsed. And I think mainly the main reason is fear. I think you get a choice in life to live by love or fear. And we've had a lot of both. And we try and we pray to always live by love. And that's kind of what we boil it down to, though, is it seems to be the ones that are afraid are always like, what's going to happen? What if you get sick? And what if you kill each other? And, everything else. And others are just kind of like, if you die young, you had a love that,
Was worth it.
And that I know I wanted my whole life. And I don't know if I ever truly believed I would find it. And so we've definitely developed a little bit,
thicker skin for thicker skin.
he has,
work.
I haven't.
Jonathan.
So,
Love is powerful. It's about love when you're on this earth, right? So I completely understand what you're saying. And I also think that, couples can get cancer maybe at different times. All kinds of things happen. So it is very much judgmental if you're getting any sort of hate, which I think is so wrong, of course, and nobody should judge anyone else's decision. And I thank you for sharing it, because I know everyone won't be cheering you on,
and that's okay.
Yeah.
It used to make me really mad, and now it still hurts, but I'm like, it's okay.
even if you were separate, the argument about it is so, you still have insurance, you still have bills, whether you're together or not. It's an interesting discussion. We could go on and on about it. But now that you briefly mentioned kids, is that something that you're thinking about, or is
Statistically unlikely. I think we both have open hearts is that if that happens, we're not seeking extra help through in vitro or anything like that. And we're not avoiding anything either. It's just, we're just kind of open-handed about it. If it happens, we're on board. If it doesn't happen, that's pretty much what we've been expecting our whole lives. So
Right.
we're okay there too.
Yeah, I was always told, I always say, I don't know if I ever really developed a maternal instinct. And I know that that's not necessarily the same across the board, because I know many CF friends of mine that have longed to be mothers their whole lives. I never really developed that because they told me when I was young it was not going to happen. And so I just said, okay, so I will make I don't want to say my purpose necessarily, but I'll still have value, I'll still have purpose.
Right.
And we've talked about adoption. We've talked about what if it happened? Would we freak out and it's just been I think really for us being, people of faith, that if that happened between 2 CFers, it was supposed to. And so that's kind of the way we look at it. If it happens, awesome. If it doesn't, that's okay too. We try to just stay open-handed to that. So
Yeah. And for anyone who might not know, men with cystic fibrosis are usually infertile, but women with cystic fibrosis can have children. And sometimes it depends on the person. It can increase how sick you get. The pregnancy can impact how healthy you stay. So there is a lot around it when you're talking about that. But I also wanted you to talk about what you do, Farrel. And then Zach, I was just going on your Instagram and saw a beautiful post, and you are doing a lot of writing, correct? And tell us about that and what you're doing.
Sure. So cystic fibrosis is one of many fires that ended up awaiting me in this lifetime. And I have been blessed with an opportunity and a passion for writing. And so I'm actually about halfway through penning my memoir. It's going to be called Love You More Than Life. And there's a whole long story to it that I won't go into, but it's just the way that there's been a silver thread of sacrificial love and unconditional love through my whole life. starting with my dad and showing up in Zack and so many other areas that I can't wait to write about. But as I'm doing that, I'm actually also doing in December, I opened a very small little home-based, I don't want to call it a business. I sell things that I like to make. But it's called Breath of Life Handmade. And I recover stone paper journals, and I make greeting cards and wall calendars right now. It's just a little paper products business. But it's inspired by, they said that I wasn't going to be here past 8. And I kind of jokingly call that, in CF humor, I call that my expiration date. And I'm 3 decades past that, and I attribute that to the grace of God. And so I have kind of made a hobby / if you want to call it a business, creating artwork on how I see life through that lens. And there's a cystic fibrosis part of that. There's a lot of scripture to that. It's just kind of whatever I feel inspired to write through that. And so far, it's been really cool. It's been cool to see how people have responded to it. So those are the 2 things that I'm kind of into right now.
That's wonderful. And Zack?
Yeah. So when Farrel and I first met, I was a CrossFit coach at a gym. Was paid coach and did that whole thing. Man, lots changed since we got married. But I still do CrossFit out of my home gym in my garage here. And I don't charge. My license is expired and everything. So I just have people over who either want to exercise with me or have some kind of goal in mind. And I just work with dudes in my garage. That's fun for me. And it's a male camaraderie building thing. My fitness goals look completely different now than they did when I was, 25, 30 years old. I care way more about being able to get out of bed in the morning without pain than I do about lifting 500 pounds now. So things have changed, but they're also still the same. And it's just a really cool opportunity. We each kind of got our own thing of where we volunteer and where we put our time, effort, and energy into. Mine's usually, almost strictly all guys based, whether that's at the gym in my garage or, different ministries we serve at. I typically stay with all dudes and love being able to pour into different guys through our faith. And she does through various ladies groups, and we do stuff together a lot. We, cook and serve food and do a lot of food ministry stuff together. It's an adventure. It's always an adventure. We're always doing something new from month to month.
That is wonderful. And like I always say with my foundation and even these podcasts, talking to you, in my opinion, is therapy. Like, I feel that getting to learn other people's stories, your stories, I always get something wonderful and inspirational from it. And it always makes me think differently about maybe how I was thinking about something, even in this case about, people with CF getting married. So for you, what does what you do, how does that impact you in your life?
The physical fitness aspect?
Yeah.
It's hard. It's very hard. But, Farrel touched on just how totally different our side effects and symptoms in life with CF is. Like, we're 100% different. What works for me does not work for her and vice versa. For me, staying physically active, getting my heart rate up, riding a bike, jogging, getting in the gym and lifting heavy weights, moving fast, doing push-ups, sit-ups, squats, air squats, that kind of thing. Like, that keeps me going and keeps me healthy. And I don't know. I've not been totally inspired to do a YouTube channel or anything like that, but I've had other CF guys reach out to me, like bodybuildings, especially since modulators have come out. Everybody that had been in the gym for 10 years already started getting big. And it was like, yeah, we can get big. This is cool. The getting big's not really my thing anymore, but staying physically active. And yeah, can I stay in the gym 4 or 5 days a week and keep moving and keep long-term plan? I'm still floating around 35% lung function. I'm not running marathons, but right. Yeah, I do care about staying here and not getting worse. It's definitely long-term goal oriented.
And what are your hopes for the future for both of you, or your plans career-wise? Where do you hope to see yourself going?
So, gosh, who knows?
And your hopes maybe with the CF community even, yeah.
If I had like a goal, it would just get to be really just an author. I'm fine with being an author, to actually get my story out there and get to share. If I could achieve best-selling author, like that would really be like I think that would be the icing on the cake. That would be the cherry at the top. That would be okay, I've done what I wanted to do here. I would love to get to be a best-selling author and just get to meet people. I don't necessarily need the speaking engagements. He's very active. He stays very active to stay healthy. I need a lot more rest. I always joke that I'm kind of like a puppy. I like cuddles and snacks and sleep, and I'm good. But yeah, I would say that would be my dream come true, to get to be healthy enough to get to travel and to get to meet people, and to get to share my story with anybody who will listen, really.
Well, I think that's great, Farrel. Yeah. And why not? You should be. And then we'll have you back on the podcast, or we'll be on your podcast by then. Who knows?
Maybe so.
Yeah.
Gosh, I'm such a winger guy most of the times. Travel would be awesome for us. I would love to go around speaking to people. I think long-term goal, and we've talked about, if we had our own little plot of land wherever it is, our own little tiny home wherever it is, to be able to still have a community gym for guys and physical fitness, and to be able to have some kind of community aspect where we could set up picnic tables and feed people, and make it a once, twice, 3 times a week thing where people are just invited to come gather, share stories. Like, we didn't touch much on the mental health except for what you said. This is our mental health, and being able to share meals and sit across the table from people, that keeps us going.
That's something that we're both very passionate about. We love cooking for friends. We love having them over. We love game nights. We love the one-on-one. Like, social media and the internet are beautiful things when they're used correctly. Like, they can change the world, but nothing will ever replace the sitting across the table and the sharing the food and sharing the stories and really getting to do life with each other. And that's something we're both very passionate about. We love opening our home, and we really haven't probably over the last 6 months because of the different health concerns, but we're looking forward to getting to the point where we can do that again. And I think we both really miss that. We miss.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
We also just moved out of the city.
Yeah. So
6 months ago. We're 30 minutes.
We're new here.
We're 30 minutes from our old friends, so it's tough.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, I think it's beautiful. And I also think, since you put all your dreams out there, of course it's going to happen now. I mean, it would have happened anyway, but I always think that once you visualize it and put it out there, it's going to happen. So I wish that for the both of you. Anything you wanted to add before we wrap up here? Anything inspirational you have to say to the CF community or anything like that?
I would have to say my truest encouragement for the cystic fibrosis community would not be necessarily to be a rebel or to buck a system just to buck a system, but to be okay with thinking outside of the box and be okay with stepping out in faith and be okay with maybe doing things differently than you have in the past. If something isn't working anymore, to be okay with kind of taking a different route and kind of seeing where that takes you. Everybody is different. I think I've had 2 doctors in my lifetime of all the medical history that we have. 2 doctors have looked at me and said, I'm not the expert. You are. You're the one who lives with this every day. And I hugged one because I knew him very well, and the other one I just met. So I didn't hug him, but I wanted to. Just because that was such a relief. I feel like a lot of times textbook and knowledge can replace compassion. And I understand that there's a lot of concern with doctors to not want to try things out of the box, because what if it doesn't work? What if you do end up hurting yourself? And I would say that's probably my encouragement, though, is just, if I can boil it all down, you are your greatest advocate and you know yourself better than anybody else. And if you have to fight for that, then fight. It's okay to fight for that. If nobody's listening, if nobody's paying attention to you, if nobody is helping you in the way that you need to be helped, it's okay to fight for that. It's okay to fight for change if you have to.
Beautiful words. Great advice.
She's awesome. Dude, nothing gets us through this life without Jesus. It's just plain and simple. I did this life for a long time without Jesus, my first 30 years. Life is hard, and there is no guarantee that it's going to be easier if you try harder or do more. I've laid that down at the altar many, many times. There are many years I spent 100% compliant, didn't miss a medication, didn't miss a breathing treatment, didn't miss an exercise, and I still got sick. And I didn't have anywhere to take that kind of pain because I was doing everything I could. And it wasn't until I found Christ that I found hope on the hopeless days.
Yeah.
And, my wife was my first, my first witness of what hope during crisis looks like. And we need it. The world needs it more now than ever. We need hope on the hopeless days. And we're not promised health. We're not promised longevity, but we are promised a Savior that walks with us through the valleys.
Yeah.
And that keeps us going on the hard days.
Absolutely. If I can share one other story,
Sure.
like this is one of my very favorite stories. I remember at my absolute sickest in 2018, one of my favorite Bible verses is God is talking to the Israelites, and he tells them, essentially, I won't quote the whole, but essentially he says, I will be the one that carries you, even to your old age and gray hairs. It will be me that sustains you. I will carry you and I will rescue you. And I remember in 2018 being so sick and knowing when I read it, just knowing deep within me that was for me. And also looking around going, okay, you're losing your marbles a little bit, And 2.5 years later, I found my first 2 gray hairs. And so I got to see a promise of God in action, and it rocked my world. And so, yeah.
It's beautiful. I think everybody needs to do what works for them. And I think it's been wonderful to meet you. You're just 2 inspirational people. And I'm really glad that you found each other and that you're making things happen, and impacting the CF community, and talk to us today to share with us your journey. It's really going to impact other people, and I really appreciate it. So thank you both.
Thank you so much for having us.
The original music in this podcast is performed by Kevin Allen.
It's not complicated.
Who happens to have cystic fibrosis.
We all got our worries and fears. I know what's got you frustrated, but loving you is so alright.
This has been the Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast. For more information and to learn more about the Bonnell Foundation, visit our website at thebonnellfoundation.org. That's the BONNELL Foundation.org. This podcast was sponsored by Viatris, Genentech, and Vertex. It was produced by Jag and Detroit Podcasts. Follow our show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening right now.